Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Muslim Podcaster Show. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my guest, co-host from snowy Canada, brother Abdul Ahad. Assalamu alaikum, bro, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you for your warm welcome during these cold times in Canada.
Anytime, bro, anytime. Subhanallah, it's not Ramadan yet, but when this podcast will be released, inshallah ta'ala, it will be Ramadan. So Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak to everyone listening and watching, and also to you, bro.
Yeah, likewise, Ramadan Mubarak. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit from this month and many more Ramadans to come, inshallah.
Ameen, Ameen. What are you saying, bro? Do you think Ramadan's come around quick or?
Yeah, subhanAllah, it's just one of the signs of the end of times when time feels so much shorter than it actually is. I remember last Ramadan like as if it was 2 days ago. SubhanAllah, it really just flew by.
Exactly. And that's the thing, it's like they say towards the end of times, time itself will lose barakah and stuff. And but at the actual positive out of it is that hopefully we can live and see and benefit from another Ramadan. As they say that woe to the one who lives through Ramadan and doesn't benefit from it. It's a month full of mercy. The gates of Jahannam are closed. The it's like a lottery of a'mal and hasana and good deeds. And we shouldn't be miserly in this month. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with so much, and we should try to make the most of it, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, that's definitely true. We do not want to be among the losers who miss out in this blessed month. So indeed, we should profit from it.
Exactly, bro. Exactly. So listen, let's get into the topic, inshallah, and just to sort of like set the scene. So one thing, if you read history, if you read seerah, and we can see that Ramadan in the past is kind of different to Ramadan today. So what I'm trying to say is that nowadays Ramadan, what you'll see, and I don't know if this is the same in Canada, but there is a lot of focus on the inward looking type of attitude, and almost to an extent of isolation, self purification, self reflection, and these things are very, very important, right? But we live in times where if we were to look outside in the world, we see plenty of oppression, plenty of injustice, and we can talk about Gaza, we can talk about what's happening in West Bank, which isn't actually talked about enough. We can talk about Sudan, Kashmir, Xinjiang, East Turkmenistan. There's the list just seems to continue. But if we look in history, we can see that actually Ramadan wasn't a month of isolation, rather it was a month of action. And the Muslims achieved great victories in the month of Ramadan. And some people even call Ramadan the month of victory. So I'm thinking, right now, we can really do with the month of victory as an ummah. But when you speak to people, the attitude and the sort of like view of how to spend Ramadan is a bit different to how it was carried before, in my opinion anyway. What's your thoughts on this, bro?
I think you're actually forgetting just one particular thing when it comes to the modern experience of Ramadan. We live in a time of commercialization and entertainment. So, let alone the internal assessment of Ramadan and spiritual renewal, which of course is very embedded in Muslims to seek. The thing is that now today, a lot of the times it just becomes more of a matter of socialization, a matter of getting together and sometimes focusing so much on the iftars and the suhoors, having a suhoor festival, all these particular things. Regardless if there's khair or not in these things, people forget about, of course, that spiritual renewal. And then on another note, as you mentioned, it is a month of victories throughout the history of Islam. It is not just a month of that internal assessment of renewal, but also a nasiha, a reminder for us of how many victories occurred during the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam up till today, throughout the centuries. So I definitely do resonate deeply with what you said. It's something that is much greater than even an individual aspect, or the kind of aspect, as I mentioned, this commercial entertainment kind of aspect. So I definitely do resonate with that.
Yeah, and you touch on an important point, and bro, we're all guilty of it, if we can say that. Where
Mm.
Ramadan does become about iftar and suhoor, really, to be honest with you, more so about iftar. And it has. I mean, I'm not pointing fingers at other people. I'm just saying that sometimes it does, and tarawih, and then you have itikaf at the end. But I think the purpose itself of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like one of my kids asked me, what's your Ramadan resolution? I never even knew there was that terminology. But I was like, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I can get more closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than I am right now, then I would, hope that this Ramadan has been beneficial. But at the end of the day, then I think maybe the problem, and it would be good to get your thoughts on this, is how we actually view Islam itself. Because if we see Islam as purely from a spiritual aspect, then when we basically try to improve and do more in Ramadan, it's always going to be on that spiritual aspect. So if you think about nowadays, what will we do more in Ramadan? Generally, we will recite more Quran. Alhamdulillah. We will pray nawafil, we will pray tahajjud and stuff like this. But if you think about it, it's like we're doing more of what we normally do. But a lot of these things are the actions which are mandub, which are recommended. You understand? However, if we look back, and I'm sure you'll give some examples from the past times, it'd be good to get some examples from you about some of the achievements within Ramadan throughout history. But maybe because they viewed Islam more on the same line as the mission of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that the things that they were normally doing, which was submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, establishing justice, and then spreading Islam far and beyond, then what we saw then is an acceleration of this within the month of Ramadan. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
we are here, so we get to here. But if you're there, then you can only aim higher. If you understand what I'm trying to say.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. I think it's so important when it comes to understanding that transition from the individual assessment of what Ramadan can do and the societal assessment, the larger impact of what it can do. It's really important to understand the very premise of Ramadan, and understanding that it is a time where we are having that spiritual renewal. We're having that tazkiyah, this process of purifying ourselves, not for the sake of just the month, but for the sake of having something more consistent in the future until we meet our deathbeds. And a lot of the times, part of this, tazkiyah, it's a lot of the times it's about removing these impediments, um, anger, jealousy, lust, resentment, hubb dunya, love of the dunya, shahwat, desires, with one's eyes, with one's tongue. It's about, of course, controlling all of that. And then after, once we have removed these impediments, it's about, of course, adorning it afterwards with ihsan, with actions that resonate that ihsan, seeking beyond the obligations, be it dhikr, Qur'an, even just khulawa, just sitting alone with oneself and reflecting about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having this deep sense of shukr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we look at the times of the Salaf, for example, Imam al-Shafi during Ramadan, rahimahullah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him, he read the Quran 60 times in this blessed month, so at least 2 times a day. And of course, it takes a lot of steps to reach such a degree of righteousness, a degree of commitment and discipline, especially in this secular, liberal, capitalist society that is solely based upon us thinking about work, thinking about our next paycheck, thinking about these particularities. So it's very important to understand, the individual assessment should be thoroughly studied by looking at the seerah, looking at how Rasulullah fasted during Ramadan, how the Sahaba fasted during Ramadan, how the Salaf fasted during Ramadan. It was a particular time where Imam Malik, rahimahullah, of Medina, he would actually stop his hadith classes to teach, to focus fully on the Quran. So it is a month of the Quran. It is a month of connecting to the Quran, not for the sake of just that month, but for, of course, building a foundation for the years to come, be it Ramadan or not.
Yeah, no, exactly, bro. And I think another important point there would be that connection. Maybe where we kind of like don't appreciate, and we don't appreciate the essence of what you're saying is, even though Imam Shafi, rahimahullah, would have recited the Quran 60 times within Ramadan, he would have understood it 60 times, right? And many of us, especially if you're non-Arabs, we will recite the Quran, and of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inshallah reward us for each letter that we recite, of course, 100%. But then, because we may not understand it, when Ramadan ends, it's like, what have you actually taken from that connection with the Quran? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Because if you think about it now, if you understood the Quran and then in the month of Ramadan you're reciting it, then it's like this booster jab, basically. Obviously not a COVID one, right? But it's like a booster jab, which then lasts for 11 months, and then it's time for renewal again. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's where, when we say the Quran is the Ramadan is the month of Quran, of course it's because the Quran was revealed in this month, but also because it's for you to understand, internalize what the message is, and then organize your life based on this. And I think maybe that's where there's a bit of a where it doesn't synchronize with most of us, because we don't actually understand what we're reciting.
Mm-hmm. That's so important. This reminds me, actually, in some of the literature of Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, he emphasizes this idea that fasting is a means to cultivate sincerity, ikhlas, and also tawakkul, this reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a lot of the times our ibadah has become a routine rather than a breaking of routine. And what is meant by that is that when we are sincerely reciting the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in salah, when we are sincerely praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during our salah, are we actually meaning the words behind our ibadah? Is the heart involved with the actions? A lot of the times we think about just the actions more than the own assessment of the heart. And it is important to understand that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that fasting is a shield. And what's interesting about this concept of shield is there's so many things within our deen that is mentioned as a shield. And I think one interesting cross section between the concept of shieldship is that fasting is a shield. What else is a shield when we think about the hadith? I think about the times of the conquest during Ramadan, when there was a matter of an imamata, Khilafah, and the Khalifa being a shield. So there's an interesting cross section between the whole individual assessment of fasting and also societal implications of having a ruling Islamic governance being a shield as well. So that is definitely something that is quite interesting. And under that particular shield, did so many conquests occur during the month of Ramadan?
Subhanallah. It's an interesting way of looking at it because
Yeah.
they say taqwa is a shield,
Mm.
fasting is a shield, but they are more individual. But when the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the Imam is the shield from whom he protects you and you fight from behind him, this is more on a societal level. But let's go into some of the victories within the month of Ramadan. I know you like your history as well.
Yeah.
Very keen Islamic historist, so historian. So yeah, inshallah, let's shed some light to the audience, to everyone listening or watching, because people may just not know. Because nowadays, Ramadan is about hunger, it's about thirst, it's about you know not even water. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you understand, it's like about tired. It's about when's iftar kicking in. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit. It's like weakness. It's like you know what I'm trying to say. It's more to do with just tiredness and lethargy. And but some of the examples, inshallah, that I hope you will shed some light on will really give some much needed boost, inshallah ta'ala, to the ummah, especially in today's times where if we look around us, we definitely need a boost.
Hmm. Yeah, subhanAllah. Just as you said, Ramadan, of course, it has long been regarded not only as a period of fasting and spiritual renewal, but it is also marked by moment, moment, this momentous military victories that shaped Islamic history. And these conquests illustrate how the discipline, sacrifice, and the divine reliance cultivated during Ramadan translated into a tangible historical success. So when we look at, for example, the first battle of Islam, the Battle of Badr, the famous Battle of Badr, a lot of Muslimin know about the story of the 313 Muslimin that stood against the Quraysh, who were nearly 1,000. And at this point, the Muslimin were in a state of, many of them were in a state of fasting. And they had this sincere tawakkul and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they will gain that victory against the kuffar. And the beauty about this battle is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's unseen power came into play, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his malaika, his armies of malaika to fight against the Quraysh and gave the Muslimin this power and this quwwat, to transcend against the Quraysh, who thought that they have the upper hand by the numbers that they had. This is a battle that is historically seen as the first victory of Islam, especially the first victory of an Islamic state when the state of Medina was challenging the state of Makkah. And of course, it's not just about the Battle of Badr. There are many other battles too that I'll be mentioning. The Conquest of Makkah happened during Ramadan. And the beauty about the cohesion between Ramadan and Fatih Makkah is that how when Rasulullah sallam came in, generally speaking, he came in with this rahmah, with this goodness, with this non-violent sort of means to gain the people through this conquest. He did not come in looting Makkah. He did not come in slaughtering everybody. He came in such a way that really resonated that deep sense of fasting. Like especially a deep sense of the month of fasting, whereby we're supposed to avoid conflict. And this is a time where there was a conquest, and there was no other better time for the conquest of Makkah to happen except during Ramadan, when the Muslimin came in such a peaceful manner. Another particular battle that I liked to look at a lot is the Battle of Hattin. So, of course, many years later, during the time of the Crusades, when the Crusaders had Al-Quds for a bit over eight, eight, 8 decades. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, after carefully solidifying his leadership upon Ahlul Sunnah and defeating various foes, people, be it the Fatimid Ismailis, be it the Hashashin, be it various Sunni Muslim rulers under the Zengid dynasty, for example, that were more heedless towards this cause of jihad to liberate Al-Quds. He finally managed to gain Egypt and Syria. And through basically this blessed month of Ramadan, despite, the physical rigors of fasting, the Muslim forces managed to encircle and decisively defeat the overconfident Crusaders. And this victory not only paved the way for the recapture of Al-Quds, but also demonstrated that spiritual discipline of Muslims during Ramadan equips the Muslims with the resilience needed to achieve these sort of triumphs. And of course, with that victory, you had the liberation of Al-Quds. And imagine, during this time, when we sort of contrast the times of then, when the Muslimin were still fasting, and of now today, where you have Muslimin talking about, oh, I have work, oh, I have school, I can't fast, it's a bit hard. We see that there's a huge contrast of mindset that we should be looking back towards in order to seek that kind of understanding that, hey, we were like this once. Why do we humiliate ourselves? And of course, it's not just a month of conquest, it is a month of defense too. There was the famous Battle of Ain Jalut, the famous battle where basically you had the famous Mamluk sultans, Qutuz and Baybars, who were defending the area of Asham from further Mongol annexation. And this was a time when the Mongols actually wanted to reach Al-Quds, and they wanted to reach Makkah and Medina, and they spoke about desecrating these blessed places. And during this month, there is a famous particular tactic that Qutuz used and Baybars used during this battle, where basically they managed to lure in the Mongols into this enclave, and they were just shooting arrows from higher ground trees towards down to the valley of the Mongols. And there was this heroic scene of Qutuz during this time of the battle, where when the Muslims were starting to get weak on maybe I think the left wing, he took off his helmet so his soldiers could identify, and he said the famous chant, "Ya Islam," "Oh my Islam," and he charged in, and they defeated the Mongol commander, and they defeated the Mongols from advancing ever again into Al-Quds. This is just thinking about this and contrasting, the individual assessments of today, where we think just because of our inferior complexity, where, I don't want to fast right now, it's a bit hard because I have a 10-hour shift, but then we compare it to our ancestors. SubhanAllah. Another famous battle that I have to mention is the Battle of Guadalete. This was when Tariq ibn Ziyad, he just entered into Spain, and there was the famous assessment, where basically the king at the time, the Visigoth Christian king Roderick, basically violated the daughter of one of the noble people of Morocco at the time, and that was basically the reason for war, the jus ad bellum, the reason for war. And Tariq ibn Ziyad came in to seek vengeance and also conquest against the oppression of King Roderick. And not only did, during this time, the battle became legendary because there was the famous case that is mentioned, Allahu alam in regards to the validity of it, but this seems like the case of Tariq ibn Ziyad, when he, during this time of Ramadan, when he came into Spain from Morocco, he burnt his ships, eliminating any thought of retreat, and said I think, one of the most coldest quotes of Islamic history. And he says, there is no escape behind us. It is either martyrdom or victory. And of course, the Muslimin managed to defeat the forces of King Roderick and go all the way into sovereign France, subhanAllah, through this. So this conquest just illustrates that Ramadan, once again, it nurtures both this martial courage and resolve to embark on ventures that fully reshape history. Another battle that I want to mention is the siege of Constantinople. Actually, both of them. So there was the first one that happened under the Umayyads, for example. It was not an immediate success, but it did plant the seeds of conquest for the latter conquerors. And of course, you had the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople, 1453, by Muhammad al-Fatih. There's the famous hadith of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, anhu, that basically narrates that the Prophet ﷺ spoke how there would be this conqueror of Constantinople, and how great would he be, and how great would his army be. And indeed, Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih, rahimahullah, was the one who, utilizing his innovative military tactics, such as transporting ships over land, the Ottomans managed to breach formidable Byzantine walls. And this historic victory not only fulfilled the long-standing prophecy of Rasulullah regarding the city, but also marked the rise of the Ottomans as a preeminent global power. This conquest during Ramadan exemplified the union of military ingenuity and spiritual fortification gained through fasting. There are so many other battles I can mention. The Battle of Qadisiyah during the time of Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, when he was the commander, that led to the Muslim capture of Persia, Iraq, and Iran. And there are so many more that I can mention. The Battle of Mohawks, for example, during the time of Sultan Suleiman, the Magnificent of the Ottomans, when he fought and defeated the forces of Hungary in only 2 hours, during Ramadan. There's so many more battles I can mention, but the theme is always the same, that during these high times of history, not during just the time of Rasulullah, but throughout the centuries, the Muslims had the means of spiritual fortification that allowed them to fully excel into conquest, into defense, into the fullest form of military engagement, as the Muslimin should. And we should really wake up, honestly. When we feel lazy in bed, and this is, I think, the disease of the Ummah today, that is killing manhood, that is killing, people say feminism kills manhood. It does, but what is also killing manhood next to that is bed-rottedness. And this is something that should be avoided during Ramadan, especially when we're listening to these stories of the Muslimin and how they managed to overcome this during fasting. They did not even think about fasting, or the effects of fasting. They thought about just what their duty was. We should be inspired as Muslimin to seek this kind of sense of self and sense of larger victories.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. I mean, those examples that you've provided, obviously, brother Abdul Ahad has just given a brief description. Everyone should go and check these out. Some obviously we know about anyway, about like Battle of Badr and Conquest Fatah Makkah and stuff like this, but definitely look into not just the event, but into the individuals as well. But you made a really, really interesting point, bro, in terms of how, if you think about the actual victories that were achieved, those victories could not have been achieved if the discipline wasn't there. So like you mentioned about the ulama. The ulama have talked about how Ramadan is a month which is about self-reflection, is about self-improvement, but also it's to give you that discipline to then go out and do what needs to be done. And without that, you wouldn't be able to do it. So that's why, if you think about then in the month of Ramadan, even with the heat, with the hunger, with the thirst. But because the people, the level of the taqwa must have been like sky high, it must have been, on an extremely high level where none of these things mattered, because all that mattered was the mission that was ahead, whether it was offensive, whether it was defensive. But it kind of like, when you read, bro, when you look at those times and you look at now, it almost feels like they had superhuman capabilities, but the reality is they didn't. They were human, and we are human today. They had the deen, we have the deen today. So it's not like we can, you know, just use as an excuse. Oh, though, their breed was different, they were on a different level. The ingredients for excellence, the ingredients for victory, are there today as they were in back then. But why do you think this situation then occurs, bro? In the sense where, is it just the fact that we have lost the connection with our history, we've lost the connection with the people that we're talking about? Our role models have become role models on YouTube, and our footballers and sports people. I don't know what they play in Canada, but whatever it is, yeah. Sound trying to say, like,
Yeah.
could that be one of the reasons? And also just the understanding of Islam itself, because if Islam has been reduced to a pacifist, almost spiritual, inward religion, then the notion of expansion, the notion of fighting oppression, the notion of fighting injustice, it doesn't come naturally, because that's not part of Islam. Islam is just about smiling at people and just doing your own personal things and being a good person. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. SubhanAllah, I was just thinking about some works of Imam al Ghazali. There's one literature he wrote, The Revival of Religious Sciences. And he talks about during fasting this threefold way of purification. And of course, it is an internal assessment. I want to relate it towards that larger assessment of the Ummah that you mentioned. He basically described three levels of fasting. The first basic level is physical abstinence from food and drink. A very simple thing that I think everybody accomplishes, at least everybody who fulfills the obligations of deen. The second level involving the avoidance of sins and wrongful acts. And the highest form is where one abstains from all distractions that divert the heart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, for Ghazali, true fasting is this holistic discipline that transforms both the body and the spirit. And he cautioned against over this matter of overindulgence during iftar, and stressed that humility and gratitude are keys to unlocking the spiritual benefits of Ramadan. A lot of the times, these individual assessments, when we realize and stay firm upon this consistency of this consistent sort of process of purification, we realize that it's not just a matter of, you know, especially when it comes to the third stage, it's not about just abstaining from distractions that divert the heart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, distractions being um, individual assessment sins, for example, listening to music, being friends with the opposite gender unnecessarily, doing various forms of fahisha, but it's also understanding that at a societal level, as Muslimin, we are in a desperate situation. March 3rd of this year will mark, at least in the Gregorian calendar, will mark 100 years since officially we did not have a Khilafah. Of course, it was weakened much more, uh, a few decades in, but nevertheless, it will mark 100 years that we did not have Khilafah. And when understanding this, one thing that we have to understand is that considering Imam Ghazali's third sort of level of purification, abstaining from all distractions and diverting the heart, how many times as Muslimin are we just fully embedded each day instead of understanding and bringing awareness towards the Ummah that, hey, we don't have a Khilafah right now. It is wajib upon us to have a Khilafah. So Ghazali, with his third point of the process of purification, when he mentions this whole notion of abstinence from distractions that divert the heart from Allah, it is also in reference to diverting, to abstaining away from distractions that divert the Muslim from fulfilling his obligations to bring about, to promote that Islam is a solution to all of mankind, not only in an internal assessment, but in societal implication through having an Islamic state, through having a Khilafah, through having a caliphate, through having institutions based upon the Sharia. It is so important to understand this. How many times during Ramadan do we sincerely just distract ourselves with series? We distract ourselves with entertainment. We distract ourselves with the commercial products of capitalism. You know, we are so concerned about what kind of dates we are having, if they are from Algeria or Morocco. Of course, we'll boycott the ones from Israel. But nevertheless, the thing is that we are not really putting our priorities right when we think so much about the iftars more than the state of anarchy that the Muslimin are currently in. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi had that fikr, had that concern. Tariq ibn Ziyad had that concern. Saifuddin Qutuz had that concern. Baybars had that concern. Rasulullah sallallahu, the best of all of creation, had this concern of the Muslimin. If we do not sincerely abstain ourselves from distractions that keep us away from promoting the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then in reality, let alone our internal assessment, we will gain nothing of the akhirah when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us, what did we do during the state of anarchy? What did we do for the children of Gaza who during the state of anarchy we enjoyed ourselves, we enjoyed our entertainment, we enjoyed this false sense of so-called purification of, I went to every Taraweeh, alhamdulillah, mashallah, but we did not embed it in our hearts, and we did not embed the fikr that, the people, the Muslimin who live in Al-Aqsa, who live near there, cannot even pray Taraweeh at Al-Aqsa without the conditions of the Zionists who suppressed them. And it is only through the establishment of Islam in politics, in that triumph secular liberalism, that triumph democracy, that triumph authoritarianism, that triumph every other form of regime that there can be, that is taghut, that is against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed. It is only then that when Muslims have that fikr, have that awareness, that we could sincerely achieve a larger form of purification.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. And that's really important what you say there, because like you mentioned, there's what we sense generally is that there's not really even a level of agitation amongst people. So we can go through a entire month of Ramadan. We can stand in Taraweeh, we can listen to the ayats about jihad fi sabilillah. We can about establishing justice, and you know uh, helping the oppressed, and all these things. But if it doesn't manifest itself in any change in behavior, then it's just, I wouldn't even say information. It's just, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's just noise that you're listening. It's beautiful, beautiful, recitation, melodious, and that's really where it ends. Because, like you mentioned, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, he had fikr. Tariq bin Ziyad, he had fikr. All these people that we're talking about, they had fikr. And another thing, bro, just to add to that is, when Salahuddin al-Ayyubi was doing what he was doing, or Nuruddin Zengi, or Tariq ibn Ziyad, and all these people, right? They weren't doing it so that centuries later people can talk about what they did, because they obviously didn't even know that anyone in the future is gonna. They talk about them. They would have felt like they're just an average, normal person in a Muslim. So that wasn't their motivation. That wasn't their motivation to achieve what they did. They were just behaving as a Muslim should do, and certainly one who has been given more responsibility by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which he's going to be accountable for. So, when you think of it in that way, that's how they understood Islam, and they acted in a way which was the pressing issue at the time, and they, achieved what they did through the, mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if our minds don't even go that far, if our view of Islam, if our view of Islamic history, if our view of what it means to be a Muslim has kind of been, um, you know, produced in a lab where we're just like everyone else, but we're born Muslim, and we fast in the month of Ramadan, and we may pray outside of Ramadan and so on. Then these things that we're talking about, these great victories, or even this fikr that we're talking about the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being absent, is not going to come into the minds of the normal people. So, you know, this is the second Ramadan just in the last, 15 months or so since Gaza has been happening. You know, the first one came and went. We thought, subhanallah, will something great happen in this Ramadan? This is a month where Muslims have regrouped and it's galvanized the Muslims. And it seems like another Ramadan's come in. I don't really know what to expect.
That whole notion of the fikr that these historical Muslim figures had is, of course, as you said, not for us to just look at. They did not do their actions just for us to look at them, but to be consistent upon them, just as we should be consistent with our internal assessment of seeking ihsan, of doing supplementary ibadah with ikhlas, with sincerity. Ramadan, as we saw, it is a matter of spiritual renewal. It is a time of, it is a month where divine guidance was given, and it is a time where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has proven the nusra of the Muslimin during countless hard battles in today's entertainment culture, in today's social media culture, where we could see a TikTok, oh, mashallah, the Battle of Badr happened, in the past, mashallah. It is for us to realize, as you mentioned, Gaza is a very recent phenomenon whereby we are seeing this major victory of the Muslimin. I believe, I need to double check this source. This is the first time in history that there are no Palestinian women in the prisons of Israel at the moment. There are particular claims too that some activists made. I'm just waiting for a confirmation. But if that's the case, at least this is a sincerely sought the liberation of our sisters in the prisons under arbitrary detention. Of course, there are other cases, but nevertheless, the thing is that this is a large victory of liberating at least one sister. Is a large victory for Ahl al-Gaza, especially at the cost that the Zionists have oppressed the Muslimin against. Another thing that you mentioned was, how is Ramadan going to look for the Muslimin of Palestine? And it is important to understand that Al-Aqsa, there's a lot of videos we see of Masjid Al-Aqsa when people are praying, even during Ramadan, but there are countless restrictions. First of all, people who are under 12 and over the age of 55 are allowed to come for Jum'ah Salah, for example. There are, let alone there's so many other restrictions. There are so many crackdowns that happen. We remember in 2023, I think it was in Beit al-Maqdis, Allahu Alam, where exactly it happened. It happened either in Al-Aqsa or in the Dome of the Rock, where basically we saw the IDF, the Israeli so-called defense forces, beating up our sisters, beating up the Muslimin, which was the triggering of why we saw the operation that happened on October 7th. by the Mujahideen in Palestine. So the last thing we want to see is such humiliation to occur again. And we really need to wake up as Muslimin, have a fikr as Salahuddin had, have a fikr that Qutuz had this fikr that Rasulullah had when it came to this matter. Ramadan is not a time of closing one in to those particularities of events that are occurring, these oppressions that are occurring. Of course, it is about closing in to oneself against one's nafs, against the impediments that ruin our iman, but it is not closing ourselves to the oppression. Rather, we should be vocal. We should take action as much as we can for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To act upon that fikr is a time, there's no better time than Ramadan.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah, bro. Because of the connection issue that we have, what I would like to do is just get your sort of final thoughts, and we can inshallah revisit and record another episode within
Sounds
the
amazing.
month of Ramadan again, inshallah. When hopefully when you fed the mice that are on the wheel for your internet. Um,
Yeah, I apologize for that, man.
no worries, man. No worries. Yes. Any final thoughts
Yeah,
and stuff, and I
so
think we'll wrap it up.
yeah, inshallah. The month of Ramadan, it really encapsulates this unique synergy between historical achievement, spiritual discipline, and of course the divine revelation of the Quran and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've seen that the military conquest during Ramadan, ranging from seminal victory of Badr to transformative captures of Constantinople, demonstrate that the physical and mental discipline cultivated during fasting can yield extraordinary worldly outcomes, let alone the akhirah, which is eternal, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants so much more than this dunya. Concurrently, the teachings of the Salaf and classical scholars reveal that Ramadan is fundamental about tazkiyah, this spiritual purification. It is a comprehensive purification of the soul achieved through the heightening Quranic engagement, rigorous prayer, and of course, moral rectitude. Finally, the Quranic verses and the prophetic traditions, enriched by centuries of tafsir and scholarly commentary, affirm that the Ramadan is not merely just a ritual abstention from food, but a holistic process of renewing one's relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is important to understand this multi-dimensional framework of Ramadan, not only for internal assessment, but also, as we mentioned countless times, this larger societal Ummah leveled fikr that one Muslim should always have. That it is not a month just for our concerns for ourselves, but for our brothers and sisters everywhere in the world, be it in East Turkestan, be it in Kashmir, be it in Palestine, everywhere in the world where there is dhulm, we have to have this concern.
Subhanallah, bro. Jazakallah khair for that. And it's just a bit of a shame that we're gonna have to cut this slightly short because of
Yeah,
the connection issues. But at the end of the day, I'm sure that people listening and watching would have still benefited from this episode, inshallah. And I think the key message that we kind of have to take away that Ramadan is a month of victory. It's not a month of hibernation. And when we talk about this transformation in Ramadan, we have to understand that Islam is comprehensive. It's a comprehensive deen. So that change that transformation that we experience cannot just be in one aspect. It must be in all aspects, whether that's inward, outward, private, social, whatever it is. And right now, you made a really fantastic point, bro. At the end of the day, you know, if we're one body, then we should be feeling the pain, and we should be acting against dhulm, against oppression, which is obligatory upon us. And if it's obligatory, then in the month of Ramadan, we should take it to new heights. And I think this is where maybe there's a bit of a misunderstanding because we do exert ourselves in the month of Ramadan, but we always tend to do it in certain aspects. However, if we can understand that what Islam requires of us, then this is something which takes us to another level. Should do anyway. And in the same way, the Muslims in the past, whether it was in Constantinople, whether it was in Hittin, whether it was Ain Jalut, you know, Muslims took things to another level because of this month, because of the discipline, and they achieved great things. No one had destroyed the walls of Constantinople, but it was done. No one had stopped the Mongol hordes. It was done. So I think these are the things where you mentioned in some previous podcasts about this colonization of the mind, and as long as we are colonized, we will never really appreciate our potential. But one way of appreciating our potential is not to look at the state of the Muslims today, is to look at the state of the Muslims in the past and see what we can achieve as if we hold on to our deen, if we become united, and if we submit to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we work to attain His pleasure, then these things are also achievable even in the modern era. But brother Abdul Ahad, Jazakallah khair for taking time out. I know there's a snowy storm going on. Stay safe, stay warm, and I pray that tomorrow you'll be able to make it to Taraweeh if Ramadan does start on Saturday. But I'm sure you can just take out your ski or your wellies or something like that. But yeah, inshallah ta'ala, we will definitely record another episode, inshallah, in the month of Ramadan, if you're going to be free.
Barakallah Fik for this. It was very beneficial, let alone the connection that Shaitan tried to interfere with wasn't the best.
That's what I was saying, bro. I think you start speaking about the certain deep concepts, and all of a sudden the internet went, and there's too much of a coincidence. But listen, we'll leave you on that, and inshallah ta'ala, please, for everyone who hasn't liked and subscribed, make sure you do. And I do plan on releasing daily reminders throughout the month of Ramadan, so please check them out. And until the next one, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.